He participated in seminars and all kinds of discussions in those years when I at least had been engaged in this what at this time was called the Building Institute. He recorded our work by making slides and films and other documentations. And he gave other lectures here too, and he liked to come to USC. And 2 years ago, the Board of Trustees honored him with this high distinction of an honorary doctor degree of laws, which he enjoyed evidently very much. I thought this, besides many other things, are enough reasons for us to invite as many as possible friends to come together and contemplate and think a few more minutes about Charles Eames, who is no more with us. It is not my intention to, in no way whatsoever, to deliver a eulogy or to glorify him. I only want to show to us, also to myself and to everyone, the legacy which he left us, the documentation of the kind of work he was engaged in, which intrigued me indeed very much, even if I would not offhand say we both spoke exactly the same language. But he was a very good and a very important man in our many endeavors. Therefore, I thought to address our academic institution as well as the neighborhood institution, just as UCLA and Pomona and SCI-Arc and whoever desired to come. In fact, I must admit, I expected a great deal of students here. And I am, for the first time, extremely surprised, but in the pleasant sense that not so many students came. And they evidently know already all the facts and don't have really to come to such events. So I want to do as short as possible, lead you into my personal opinion about the meaning and the life and the work of this extraordinary man. And by the way, I just remember I have to properly introduce myself. My name is Konrad Wachsmann, and I am Professor Emeritus for a number of years at this university here. The reason why I thought such conversation as this one, which I have in mind, and which I really will make major efforts not to extend to more than 1 hour, and maybe a few additional minutes, and shall show us what really happened in this center of cultural gravity, if I may say so, of the southern part of the great state of California. To explain from which point of view I look upon such problems, I like to state that in the year 1945, I came for the first time to Los Angeles. It was a few weeks after the war. I had here professional a very interesting job here, and besides other people, I had the recommendation to see the John Intenza, who was at this time the editor of Arts and Architecture, I think well known to everyone. And he immediately introduced me to Charles Eames. I must admit I was absolutely taken by the intelligence, the spirit, and of those two men, and those great charmers, as I always told them. And it didn't take very long until we became real close friends. It was not only, I must say this particularly in regard to Charles, it was not only his the level of his elevated intelligentsia, but it was his expression of determination. He was a man which I met for the first time and believed him when he revealed to me what he actually wanted to do in life. You must realize 1945 was the beginning of his true career, which he has already tasted the great success which he had in his exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art in New York with his furniture, but his logic in expressing himself was so overwhelming and so significant, and I must say he kept in all those 33 years which I have known him, that I really do not consider it as a great miracle that I fell so quickly into the hands of those two men, John Intenza and Charles Eames. Charles Eames came from St. Louis, and I really don't want to give you his life story except that he stopped in Cranbrook Academy, and there I think he taught even, which I think it's some questionable activity for any young man to escape into the teaching activity. And Charles certainly learned about this, and he began that the real life is written in a quite different language as the protected life in a ghetto of academic institution of higher learnings, if I may say so. He met a girl there, which is also a popular story. Her name was Ray Kaiser, and Kaiser is a German emperor, which I always thought, I asked her the first day when I met her if she is related to the German emperor, because I think Kaiser can only exist in Germany. But she was a sculptor and actually a dancer. She was a beautiful dancer in those years. I may come back to this in a minute, because it is an important factor in the life of Charles, who was everything but a dancer. So they started now to work here. It was about in 1940, I believe. I wasn't here yet. I can only report from hearsay. He started to work with his wife and some friends and assistants or people. They helped him in his little apartment. Was 2 or 3 room apartment in those delightful housing project which Richard Neutra had built shortly before that time. And then he moved into some, as I recently had the opportunity to refresh my memory, somebody told me in some abundant bakery in Santa Monica, and from then on he went to this place 901 Washington Boulevard, which most people probably know, which became his real home, his real place where he lived. And this was, this kind of life was only composed of working and searching and experimenting and learning and trying to understand everything. At a time in which everything was so in flux that there was no real yardstick, no textbook whatsoever available where somebody could learn, for instance, what do I have to do if I want to become a decent designer. Then he came 1941, the war started, and at this time I have been already myself in the United States, and we all have been confronted with those problems, what to do now. I remember, for instance, and I think I have mentioned it here years ago, that I said to Walter Gropius, with whom in which house I lived at that time, who was absolutely desperate, December 7, and he said, that's the end, and I said, I think this will be some sort of beginning. Now we will enter a new century. People will come to their senses. And I do not want to boast. I think this is not my habit, but I thought if I look back today, I was quite right. Time has changed. And similar things have been told to me. Charles Eames told me too. He also felt, now this gives me opportunity to really to work. And they started to, since they have known something about plywood, and Ray has worked with compound, putting plies together and creating compound shapes, which is very, very difficult to do. And she did free sculptures, so they applied it to make splints for the Navy, for emergency, and they developed tools and machineries and all kinds of such devices to be able to produce in quantity those products. At this time, they had, Charles Eames had no problem, evidently, to collect an array of remarkable people around him. Everybody came to him, and I remember a number of names because it just so happened that, for not directly connected through Charles Eames, I got acquainted with many of them myself, and we became very good friends. I lived in New York with those people, like, for instance, Herbert Matter. Herbert Matter, one of the great photographers of our time. He is a Swiss born. He lived since generations in New York City. He is a fabulous man, and he evidently has been at the beginning of the war in Los Angeles and joined Charles Eames at this time. And so have been other people, for instance, Harry Bertoia. Many people of you will know him for his own furniture, which he later developed. At this time, he was one man of the team of Charles Eames, or Gregory Ain, the distinguished architect, which definitely played a very important part in the evolution of civilization of the particularly Los Angeles and California, and he was also a teacher at the USC, men which I highly admire, and he became also a member of this Eames team. And there was a man which names you probably don't know because he does not belong into the group of sophisticated intellectuals like architects used to be or should be, or fortunately are not. His name is Norman Bruns. Norman Bruns was a friend of a man whose name I already have mentioned, his specialty was electronics at a time in which people actually didn't know very much about electronics, evidently. Therefore, one could hardly find a critique which could tell me if I am good or bad. So, because nobody knows anything. But he did know. In fact, he did know quite well and worked very much on those designs and inventions and ideas which Charles felt must be integrated part of any concept of design, regardless if it is artistic or design or commercial or whatever, has whatever purpose it may have. He felt that not to use the available tool of his time would be ridiculous and absolutely irresponsible. So the people, as I said, those group of people worked feverishly to develop those machineries and equipment and tools. And then in the second part of the war, when it became a question of time that the war will be over and government was interested to provide for post-war production, gave the opportunity. You may remember this quite attractive tax problem there. Every manufacturer could take so and so many percentage of the taxes government taxes they had to pay, and could invest it in research and development, in any kind of endeavor which may, or in future time, may be useful in the American industry. So so the Eames group started to work very early on those problems, and now begins the story of the Eames chair, which I really do not want to ventilate quite very much, because this is too well known, and this is actually, it is a beautiful success story, but I see there are some other points which seem to be much more important to me. Now, to go on, I would say he had at this time to expand his activity, even if they lived under very cramped and very uncomfortable circumstances. And so they moved into a bigger place, and then from there on they moved, I think, must have been 1944 or 45, into those beautiful workshop which they still have, the Evans Corporation, Evans Product Corporation plant. And I like to see, he had now already expanded. He had produced a chair which was, to me, this is actually common sense, even if it is still considered in most cases unusual. He performed the design and not only delivered a nice-looking piece of furniture, but he also produced the whole production line, all testing, all research, all test results included, all economic studies included, all time studies included, and gave this whole thing as a package to the one who must be interested to buy that system. And Herman Miller, as you know, became the buyer. And as I heard, recently about 9 million chairs or pieces of furniture have been sold, which is quite a lot, I must say, in the last 30 years, and still are hot on the market. But still there is that man, Charlie Eames. Will he now keeping on designing, let me say, what he knows best, supposedly, namely furniture, because he could sell them, which is not necessarily a criteria of values, but he really did not do this. He expanded his field of interest, as many of you know, in many different areas. He became violently interested in information, everything that had information. He was not only a learner, he was also a man who gave messages, who gave information. He of any kind. He started photography. He had a marvelous eye, as we know, and he started to photograph. And from photograph, he became a filmmaker, and he became a lecturer, and he started even in the educational field, even if he really never had the necessary time to go deeply into the teaching process. But he did, for instance, at one time, something very interesting. For instance, together with George Nelson, the designer from New York City, he at one time he conducted a seminar at Berkeley. It must have been, I think, in the early 60s, in which he demonstrated films where there was not only sound and motion, but there was also smell a part of the whole thing. And for instance, he showed fresh baked bread, then it smelled like that. Or when they burned the house down and he filmed it, then it smelled like fire. When wood burns, then it has a very specific smell. So kind of things he did, quite many of them. But he also was a reader, and out of reading he formulated, for instance, quotations. This was one of his great hobbies, to express in the most formidable and the most, refined way, by quotations, to emphasize a point which he wanted to make, not with his own words, but by quoting things. So his world was, in which he now lived, was a world based on the absolutely dominating convictions, a sense of order, precision, the recognizing the meaning of energy in every respect, and the importance to know what a process is, the evolution of productivity, the difference between commerciality and the real exploitation, discovery, the invention, which to him was something of great significance. And in searching for the smallest little nucleus, the smallest detail he can possibly go down to understand what he was doing. So he did not operate it on surface treatments or creating beautiful things, but he started from the smallest inner core, and by assembly methods created then the whole product. And he recognized the existence of machines, and he realized that the world of tools and the crafts is a different one in the world of machines. And technology in modern time is a different technology as the technology of the Victorian time. And science is here to stay, and not to be talked about, but to be used. And to do this, maybe you have to learn. Once, as he said in one of his films, he said, if you want to speak Chinese with me, then you have to learn Chinese. And so this became a yardstick for his whole life, and so he finally succeeded. He presented inventions, the real thing, as much as he loved the real life, the facts of life. He didn't like very much about speculation of philosophies which cannot be visually seen or observed or really experienced somewhere or the other. I think it may be a good time to show you the few slides of what he's doing. Oh, I think I have to do this here. Yeah? Do you know which button here? Oh, no, they do it there already. Now, how can I turn this light off here? So. Okay. Now, I show here a few of the machines, which I myself cannot see, as I noticed, which have been built in the early 40s. And I think it is not really necessary to explain to you in detail what they are. This is a press. Let me say the basic characteristic is that they used only one die for one shape, which is put into this box here. And from below, there is a kind of vacuum pillow, which is pushed up with this jack here, and then deforms itself to this precise shape, which, if you want to produce some plywood splints, as I later will tell you. It just so happened that a few minutes ago, everything was beautifully set. That picture disappeared suddenly. And I cannot show it to you. And here we have a similar machine. I bring this to your attention only because so many times people think designing is some process in which probably somebody plays music and some artist designs there something. This is quite different story, as you may know. They have built really remarkable tools. And all those people, and Gregory Ain and Norman Bruns, people which are here present tonight, and all the others, they worked on those products. For instance, those are presses to build airplane wings from plywood, which was very desirable to have during the war, and have later been converted into producing the parts which create Herman Miller furniture. In this case, you can see here a sheet of plywood, the splints cut and stamped out, and then here, this is of course the true story of the Eames furniture history case, in which, for instance, everything becomes now compound and three-dimensional bent, and finally becomes this object here, which is the chair. So this sequence, and this gives you an idea how realistic this man was, how he realized the significance of everything. Here, for instance, those devices for high frequency gluing and pressing, which I think is a delightful story, but actually it would really don't not tell you very much, except that I can say this is a world which later may create products which you may see in the well-groomed sales office of the in the Pacific Design Center of the Herman Miller Company, and this is very often forgotten. So now here is, for instance, now the next stage is this is the chair which everybody knows, and those are those round pieces which are laminated on, which, as Norman Bruns tells me, was essentially his major job, which even I remember. In 1945, I was present when the first real experiments, or the improved experiments, because the first tries did not work out satisfactorily, have been undertaken, and finally he had here the frame and the surfaces and the joints, those three objects which happen to make a piece of furniture in the Herman Now here is the tumbling machine, which I should have shown actually before this. There is such a chair, and you can see in the what is this here? Multi-exposure.
Light is very intense.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
It's driving.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I will not use it. Maybe. He says it's too strong, this light. Yeah. Yeah. And this is actually, I have been told, I used the $80 version of the laser beam here. But some gentleman gave me this today and said, I have for you the finest version, which costs $750 now. And therefore it becomes useless because it's too strong. I could go on and show here from time to time. I will try this one. You can beautifully operate with those machines, I assure you. Now let me quickly go through that story, because I think I have spent already much too much time with it. I show you the wire structure, a system, the system design, to which this group of people which have enlightened us all over the world. He was certainly one of those men. For instance, the system, using a piece of wire and connecting it with spot welding in some way or the other, and you have this kind of device there, and or you have it in cast aluminum. And here you can see already this other side of Charles Eames and maybe Ray Eames, which was, of course, a very closely knit team in which they showed the elegance in the transfer of stresses from for instance, such point here, this point. Is of course quite significant, but in other part of the story. And so comes the flow of lines and masses and variations of materials. So, for instance, at the left side, plywood; at the right side, fiberglass structure. And here he is sitting with Ray, and it was a little bit staged. I think to me it's a little bit staged photography when the master writes his famous words down and the photographer is already ready and to shoot it, and make it a documentation. But in any way, this was his world. This world was absolutely formidable. He lived in an environment. He had in the meantime already built his own house. we have reached now about the year 1900, let me see, 48 or so, and he had a beautiful house here in Chautauqua and Palisades, but actually he went every morning at about 9:30 to his office and came back around midnight, 7 days a week and 365 days a year. And this he did for the last 40 years. It's incredible. It never stopped. And the only pause was when he went, as I wrote in a little contribution to the Los Angeles Architects magazine, and this straight line in which he lived between his house, his workshop, and the airport. He rushed to the airport and just to have those conferences with other people somewhere in the world. And here you can see the variations, always the questions of this. I like to point this out here. This, for instance, a joint like this is not to be compared with a joint like this, or the end like this. And there are always worlds in between. And he had the energy and the capacity to deal with such problems. And this is then the product. This fades away in the world of elegance and beauty, which is their own, to which I have nothing to add. I just accept it as it is. Now I like to show you how the people lived. And if you can start let me say, with a film of the house, in which most of you know. I just will show you a part of it. Yeah? Oh my God. If you permit me, I think we should stop. Can you stop? I think I just want to give you a glance, because I have several films which I would like to show you, just trying to penetrate that man and his mind. Here I show you now the place where many people have been and which, of course, became extremely important in his life. And this is his workshop. At the left side, you see a reception room, which is not, it's very cute and very nice, but nothing to say about it. But then comes those places where the work really starts. And this goes on and on and on, and then you come in a space where they have their slide collections, such as this, for instance, and they have probably asked the other day, there was a very, very sweet girl which assisted me to find those few slides which are not my own, and her name is Deborah, but I forgot her family name. But she said she thinks maybe 250,000 or more slides they have there. And then I come to the next thing was I showed first the workshop, and unfortunately I couldn't get photos from the machine shop, and then here the slide collections, and then the film collection, the film establishment, the whole equipment which they have, they could reproduce multi-story presentation experiment with all kinds of those things, and and expanded it in this area, and then here begins, for instance, the story. What kind of films did they do? And they did everything. They started with little, tiny, incredibly beautiful sometimes. As one which we tried out today, but which unfortunately would take too long. It has the title Black Top, which I have seen many, many times and still I'm not tired to see. And then we have this children's toys. He was this type of man who liked to play all the time. I think I always thought, and I think sometimes I said to him, you actually are the glorified playboy. You love to play, and this is what many people said to me too. They said, don't be so childish. You are not 12 years anymore. People used to say this to me too. So I show you one of those films, for instance, which this is a grown-up man made. Now we saw his workshop already. Now comes a new type of workshop. This is a place how it always looked there when they make exhibition, which was in recent years Charlie's particularly hobby. And this was about the preparation of any given exhibition, such as, for instance, the exhibition of mathematics at the Museum of Science and Industry, which I still think is just across the street from here, and which I think is the most educational instrument we can think of, where people can really understand the structure of this planet on which we live. And you will be amazed how few people from in this neighborhood really went over there and saw, for instance, that exhibition. I show you a few details. Here at the right side, probability theory, and then I cannot really see from here very well. At the left side, the Möbius curve, and here here again probability, and then this beautiful theme which he always had, and which I so really violently, I may say, agree with him, about the meaning of a point in space. It's a point. And he made a film of which I show you a fraction, which may not take longer than 3 minutes. It is a half-hour film. And I show it to you right now. And it is a story of a point in space.
Yeah. The current flows.
Yeah.
It ceases to flow.
And it is Charlie Eames's voice. He recorded it himself.
Stop or go. On or off. One or none. Go or no go. Or black or white. As in this small area from a halftone reproduction in a magazine. The press that printed it is capable of printing but one color of ink at a time. In this case, black ink on white paper. In order to transmit the image, it had to be broken down to many points of decision, black or white. We know that such a limitation is not at all restricting if enough decisions are made. In this case, 500,000 decided points give fair rendition. 1,000,000 would be better. Conventional printing of color is no different except that with the added factor of color, 4 times the number of decisions had to be made. One set in yellow, one in red, in blue, and in black. Whenever added factors in a problem are recognized, the number of decisions necessary for the solution grows by large leaps. As theories and equipment and men develop, it becomes apparent that one sure way of handling multiple factors is to build a system that can handle each decision in its time. Men have long known the theory on which complex problems...
Can we stop it? Thank you. You got the idea. It is a point. And once when he says so beautifully 500,000 points in a certain square inch area, and says 1,000,000 would be better. This actually, I admit freely, covers my own whole philosophy in life. How deep are we permitted to go in our thinking and capability to recognize the structure of life? So he made quite a number of exhibitions. This is a Jefferson exhibition and Benjamin Franklin, and which you have seen here, and I'll show you a few details. And then comes this beautiful Copernicus exhibition, which has been started first in Poland, And actually, it just so happened at the same time I was also in Poland and sitting in a restaurant. He was sitting at the next table, which was so typical for us. For instance, we saw ourselves more often in New York, London, Chicago, or Warsaw, or Paris, than in Los Angeles. The distances are much smaller in the outside world than here locally. And here's also few of those samples. Now, at this point, I like to add this film, which you probably, most of your people have seen, or at least practically everybody has heard about it. It is a film which belongs into this category, I think, and has a title, The Power of 10. And it is a new version which he made. Unfortunately, I must say, I'm not convinced that it is the answer to visualize the true problem. But the way how he indicates this problem as an existence is absolutely fascinating. So let us see this film.
The picnic near the lakeside in Chicago is the start of a lazy afternoon, early one October. We begin with a scene 1 meter wide, which we view from just 1 meter away. Now every 10 seconds we will look from 10 times farther away, and our field of view will be 10 times wider. This square is 10 meters wide, and in 10 seconds the next square will be 10 times as wide. Our picture will center on the picnickers, even after they've been lost to sight. 100 meters wide. The distance a man can run in 10 seconds. Cars crowd the highway. Powerboats lie at their docks. The colorful bleachers are Soldiers Field. This square is a kilometer wide, 1,000 meters. The distance a racing car can travel in 10 seconds. We see the great city on the lake shore. 10 to the 4th meters, 10 kilometers. The distance a supersonic airplane can travel in 10 seconds. We see first the rounded end of Lake Michigan, then the whole Great Lake. 10 to the 5th meters. The distance an orbiting satellite covers in 10 seconds. Long parades of clouds, the day's weather in the Middle West. 10 to the 6th, the one with 6 zeros, 1 million meters. Soon the Earth will show as a solid sphere. We are able to see the whole Earth now, just over a minute along the journey. The Earth diminishes into the distance, but those background stars are so much farther away that they do not yet appear to move. A line extends at the true speed of light. In 1 second, it half crosses the tilted orbit of the moon. Now we mark a small part of the path in which the Earth moves about the sun. Now the orbital paths of the neighbor planets, Venus and Mars, then Mercury. Entering our field of view is the glowing center of our solar system, the sun, followed by the massive outer planets, swinging wide in their big orbits. That outer orbit belongs to Pluto. A fringe of a myriad comets too faint to see completes the solar system. Ten to the 14th. As the solar system shrinks to one bright point in the distance, our sun is plainly now only one among the stars. Looking back from here, we note 4 southern constellations, still much as they appear from the far side of the Earth. This square is 10 to the 16th meters, 1 light year, not yet out to the next star. Our last 10-second step took us 10 light years further. The next will be 100. Our perspective changes so much in each step now that even the background stars will appear to converge. At last we pass the bright star Arcturus, and some stars are the different. Normal but quite unfamiliar stars and clouds of gas surround us as we traverse the Milky Way galaxy. Giant steps carry us into the outskirts of the galaxy. And as we pull away, we begin to see the great flat spiral facing us. The time and path we chose to leave Chicago has brought us out of the galaxy along a course nearly perpendicular to its disk. The two little satellite galaxies of our own are the clouds of Magellan, 10 to the 22nd power, a million light years. Groups of galaxies bring a new level of structure to the scene. Glowing points are no longer single stars, but whole galaxies of stars seen as one. We pass the big Virgo cluster of galaxies among many others, 100 million light years out. As we approach the limit of our vision, we pause to start back home. This lonely scene, the galaxies like dust, is what most of space looks like. This emptiness is normal. The richness of our own neighborhood is the exception. The trip back to the picnic on the lakefront will be a sped-up version, reducing the distance to the Earth's surface by 1 power of 10 every 2 seconds. In each 2 seconds, we will appear to cover 90% of the remaining distance back to Earth. Notice the alternation between great activity and relative inactivity, a rhythm that will continue all the way into our next goal, a proton in the nucleus of a carbon atom beneath the skin on the hand of the sleeping man at the picnic. Ten to the 9th meters, 10 to the 8th, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We are back at our starting point. We slow up at 1 meter, 10 to the 0 power. Now we reduce the distance to our final destination by 90% every 10 seconds, each step much smaller than the one before. At 10 to the minus 2, 1/100th of a meter, 1 centimeter, we approach the surface of the hand. In a few seconds, we'll be entering the skin, crossing layer after layer from the outermost dead cells into a tiny blood vessel within. Skin layers vanish in turn. An outer layer of cells, felty collagen. The capillary, containing red blood cells and a roughly lymphocyte. We enter the white cell. Among its vital organelles, the porous wall of the cell nucleus appears. The nucleus within holds the heredity of the man in the coiled coils of DNA. As we close in, we come to the double helix itself, a molecule like a long twisted ladder whose rungs of paired bases spell out twice, in an alphabet of 4 letters, the words of the powerful genetic message. At the atomic scale, the interplay of form and motion becomes more visible. We focus on one commonplace group of 3 hydrogen atoms bonded by electrical forces to a carbon atom. 4 electrons make up the outer shell of the carbon itself. They appear in quantum.